This is Transqat. What is Transqat? Transqat is a safe space. It's a place for respectful conversations about transgender issues. It's a place for queer people to come tell their stories. I'm host Clare McCarthy. Welcome to Transqat. The Reverend Reilly Paige is Associate Minister at First Church in Guilford, Connecticut. We met in April of this year when I was part of a panel discussion at their congregation. The event was organized by Katie Tierney at Middlesex Health, and you can check out episode 34 for my conversation with Katie. Reverend Paige and I recorded in this lovely but somewhat cavernous side room in the Guilford Public Library, where we talked about faith, queer bodies, and the difference between Buffy the Vampire Slayer and the mighty Morphin Power Rangers. Enjoy. I thought of a way into stuff we want to talk about.
Sure.
So just
go with it.
Me.
I will go with you.
When you pray, do you envision who you're talking to? Do you imagine or in your head have an image of who or what is listening? And if so, what does that look like?
Not anymore. I definitely grew up with the archetype that God was an old white guy who was angry in a rocking chair with a big white beard. Mm-hmm. And when I pray, I am more envisioning who I am praying for and sort of holding them in my mind and in my heart. And this strange thing happens when I pray where I will lose sense of space. Let me see if I can describe it better. So one of the things that I am particularly gifted in is extemporaneous prayer. So I will do the prayers of the people in church, and I will ask folks for their prayer requests, I'll write those things down, but I won't have written prayers ahead of time. I will stand there and I will pray to the divine on behalf of the people. And there are times in which that becomes a purely spiritual exercise. I will lose sort of sense of where I'm standing. I will lose, when I open my eyes, it will be, take me half a second to reorient myself. I think that's a gift I got as a pastor. Not all of us get superpowers when we get ordained, but that one is a particularly one that I cherish. I also name my spiritual gifts as like grilling and icebreaker stupid games, but praying on behalf of a group of people.
Well, that's not to go all Latin teacher on you, but that's where some of those words come from, right? Inspiration is the Spirit breathing into you. Spiro, spirare in Latin is to breathe. And enthusiasm is the God within, theos and en. So that sense of giving yourself over to the moment instead of rehearsing and letting that speak through you, I get that.
And I see your Latin, and I raise you Hebrew and Greek.
Come on.
So as part of my ordination, I was required to take a year of Hebrew and a year of Greek to be able to do my own translations, which I can still do with a lot of help and a lot of time. But the word for breath in Hebrew is ruach, and it can also mean spirit or wind. And the word in Greek is pneumos, right, or pneuma.
The breath.
The breath, yeah. And this is what makes us bearers of the image of God. It's the breath. It's the spirit. So when God takes the dirt thing, Adam, in the beginning of the Bible, and God ruachs, breathes into Adam, that is when the image of God is transferred. That is what makes us the image of God. It's the sharing of a spirit. If God is Trinity, and one of the members of the Trinity is spirit, and we have spirit or soul, that is where we are image bearers. So, I mean, it's all kind of tied together, and I love thinking about how, as a non-binary person, and moving through the world, once I claimed that I bear the image of God in an interesting way that is a gift to the church, that changed everything for me and how I'm able to stand up taller.
Well, that's exactly where I was going with that, is that you and I both inhabit queer bodies. And so I was wondering if we envision something different than people who don't inhabit queer bodies, because we are overwhelmed often with religious icons that are all pretty darn similar. And as you pointed out, pretty white. There's the old robed, bearded fellow who is sitting in judgment on us. There's the thin white guy who is suffering on the cross, and then there's
very little of the classics in between. There's a lot of great new icons that are emerging. Kelly Lattimore is a particularly great iconographer. I encourage you to Google him. But yeah, I mean, I am staunchly a Trinitarian. And I know that Jewish and Muslim siblings see that as a way of Christians sort of working around the monotheism question.
Right.
But God as Trinity makes a lot of sense to me. God as a community amongst God's selves. We call that in the Greek perichoresis. It's a divine dance. There's a movement. There's a dynamism there. And so for folks like us who are in queer bodies, who are not one thing or another thing, but on any given day, a multitude of things, we embody that multitude of God, that Trinity of God that has distinct persons and yet is contained within one entity in a very mysterious, beautiful, can't quite put my finger on it kind of way, but it's invitational and it's joyful. And on my best days, being in a queer body is joyful. They're not always the best days. No.
But
no.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense to me. And this is a weak analogy, but I'm going to just pull in my nerd cred here for a second. In Neil Gaiman's Sandman mythology, pretty early on, he introduces Dream's sister, Death, and she's this wonderful, loving, cute, young, feminine character, and she's the embodiment of death. And when I first read that and started thinking about personifications, what if they were more feminine? You know, what if somewhere between the Father and the Son there was something feminine like there was in me, and what would that be like, and how would I relate to that? So those are questions that I ask myself. You were saying your prayers are often for other people and you're focused on them.
Right.
I, being agnostic, I really think trying to personify whatever that power that we call God is, I think that's a lot of narcissism, and I think that's where we get ourselves into trouble.
Oh, yeah.
And so I don't use intercessory prayers, but I with all my heart believe in prayers of thanksgiving. And especially since coming out, I've learned that mental well-being for me is profoundly tied to being grateful.
Absolutely.
And so even if I don't envision a person out there, I believe in saying thank you when I get a gift, when when there's something beautiful or comforting in my day, or something went right. I believe in saying thank you. Yeah,
my wife and I go back and forth about this, and she makes fun of me all the time about a gratitude journal. And I am not a journaler. I have never been a journaler, but there's every once in a while there'll be some sort of article that comes across as like, people who journal their gratitude are 20% happier or whatever. Or, I'm making things up.
I'll take 20% happier.
Yeah, sure. But think of 10 things you're grateful for every day. And I don't think there's any, I think that's sort of like self-help bullshit, but there is something profound about being human and knowing that you're not in control of everything. And when things work out or you get a gift, the urge to say thank you, I think, is what makes us very, very human. I don't know if animals feel gratitude in the same way, other parts of creation. I lived in New York State for 10 years, and I just drove back last weekend, and as I crossed the New York line, I said, "Hey, baby," to New York State, and it just, there's a sense in which you get to say kind of, "Hey, baby," to the universe, and I thank you, and I love you, and it's such an impulse, and those people who have the humility to make that part of their practice, I do think are probably happier and more at peace.
That's the word humility, that you have to sort of admit to yourself, oh yeah, I'm not in control. And for somebody who was closeted for more than half a century, there are a lot of times in my day where that's unthinkable. Let go. But to do that, and I find when I get really anxious, if I close my eyes and just find one thing that happened that day that I'm grateful for, it becomes this waterfall that as soon as I get one, it's like, oh yeah, and that. Oh, and I got snuggle time with one of my cats today. That's great. And oh yeah, I got this lined up for dinner. That's going to be wonderful. And before I know it, I start feeling guilty that I was so anxious. It's like you have so much going for you. Just shut up and be grateful.
Yeah, guilt isn't a helpful emotion. It doesn't do anything for us. So if I can be a person who gives you permission, not that I have any authority in your life to do so.
I'm giving you permission. Reilly, just go.
I mean, try to let go of that guilt. I mean, we all have parts of our personalities and parts of our lives that are more privileged and more susceptible to being crapped on in this world. Areas of privilege and of power, and areas of incredible risk and disenfranchisement. And no one's perfect. No one's got all the power. Well, I guess we could name the short list of all the people who have all the power.
Yeah,
but to let yourself let go of that guilt of having a bad day or being grouchy or being sad or feeling anxious, because you're human and there are parts of your life that are vulnerable. It's hard being in a queer body in the world. Yeah. It's hard in ways where you and I don't usually have to come out about our gender because people can see it in us. It's not any easier or harder for us than it is for folks who have to continue to come out. It's just different. And in order to let go of the guilt of trying to, the guilt of having privilege when you're being humble enough to say thank you, I think that's okay to let go of.
I find that I am more generous to myself if I imagine, I try not to personify, as I said, but if I imagine that voice to be Emma Thompson, she would forgive me.
Emma Thompson would forgive you.
Yeah, and that just makes my shoulders slump in in relaxation. It's like, yeah, okay, everything's okay. Emma's in charge.
Yeah, I think that's really powerful. You get to choose your own narrator. Yeah. It's like that book, that movie, Stranger Things.
Oh yeah,
that's being narrated not by Emma Thompson.
Hey folks, it's Clare interrupting for a second. The movie that Reverend Paige and I were trying to recall is the 2006 film Stranger Than Fiction, starring Will Ferrell and Emma Thompson. Well, Reilly Paige, tell me about, let's start with your job.
Yeah, so I am the associate pastor at First Congregational Church in Guilford, and I've been there almost a year, so about 11 months at this point. And I've been a pastor, I was ordained in 2013. Most days I still think it's the right idea. Some days I wonder if I should just go bag groceries at Target, but it turns out I'm kind of good at it.
Your parishioners certainly speak well of you. So what does that entail in terms of a day-to-day?
Sure. A lot of emails. It feels like.
How exciting.
Yeah, it's cutting edge,
Yeah.
saving souls kind of work. It's writing emails. For me, it is, I get the privilege of preaching every other week, just about. So working with the scriptures, reading them, reading commentaries, trying to figure out what there might be some practical application for today in our lives. It also is visiting people who are shut in, who are sick and are lonely. It's having coffee with folks and hearing about their lives and their questions and their kids and their doubts and just getting to know them. It's about creating community and rituals where folks can feel safe and feel like they belong. Church as an institution is deeply, deeply broken. And I really try to be the pastor I needed when I was a kid and try to create spaces that I needed when I was growing up. That is the only way I'm still invested in church, is to try to pay forward the incredible luck I had. Most of the folks who came up with me are no longer believers. And for some reason, I have an unshakable knowledge that God loves me just the way I am. And trying to create, again, rituals and spaces and communities where that is a believable thing to say to somebody and not to be a place of pain or a place of shame. That's why I do what I do.
Tell me a little bit about that brokenness.
Yeah, the church is deeply colonial and it's deeply imperial. Mm-hmm. My theological ancestors come from the Netherlands, and you will see 3 different pockets of the churches they settled on the East Coast, in the Midwest, and in the Far West because of migration patterns. And so that's my family, my theological ancestors there. But with the denomination that I serve, I mean, we were part of the discovery doctrine, the doctrine of discovery, which was an edict given by one of the popes that said, when you come to a new land, it is yours should you touch it, and you can subdue the people there for God and the kingdom. And the discovery's doctrine is still in the books. It's still getting cited in modern law. So, and the church has deep, deep roots in ecological devastation, in racism and xenophobia, and all for the sake of being right and saving the quote-unquote savage and subduing the land and manifest destiny and Protestant work ethic. You know, you are as good as your actions. So if you are poor, you must not be working very hard, and you must be a person of bad moral character if you are poor. None of that is Christ-like. None of that is what the church should be doing. The church at its best says to the person who is broken and bloody and bleeding, who comes to the door saying, I need a safe place to sit down, the church at its best picks up that person in their arms and says, we need you too. We need you to be a part of us. We are not us without you. And we have centuries of bloodshed on our hands as Christians. I mean, even in the modern age. And there's a reason why white supremacy and Christianity go hand in glove all too often. So there's a lot that we have to redeem. And I use redeem as a theological concept and not reconciliation, because reconciliation implies that there's an even footing to get back to, and there was never that never existed. So there are things to redeem, there are things to reallocate, to make reparations for, and again, like the church at its best can do that. For example, the church that I serve is 380 years old. And we have a set of communion beakers. They're silver cups that were smithed by the Revere family silversmiths.
Oh my God.
So when churches back in the day acquired their silver communion sets, there would be members of the congregation who would purchase them and donate them to the church. Their names would be etched on the cups. So we know who these people were, and we have them in the historical documents. Turns out that one of these benefactors owned at least one slave, or was as a person who owned another person. And so as a congregation, we have this incredible teaching opportunity to say our financial past is based upon the original sin of racism and of slavery. And so what is our response now, lo these many years later? To my knowledge, there aren't really any direct descendants of that person in the congregation still. But to think about what would it mean to sell some of that silver and to make a donation to a historically black institution, or to think about our relationship with Yale and what kind of education we can do, being where we are in the greater New Haven area, right. To talk about being in Connecticut and how slavery was still a thing that impacted our communities, and still deep racism in these white communities.
You work in a pretty darn upscale, white, older community.
Absolutely.
How do topics like that, like colonialism and racism and attacks on LGBTQ people, how does that go over with that kind of an audience?
They have a lot of practice in being uncomfortable. And again, I don't know who said it. It gets accredited to a lot of different people, but church should comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. There are ways in which there is pushback. People can get a little prickly when they're uncomfortable for too long. So you want to do a stretch and release when it comes to challenging folks and their own privilege. But we keep these concepts in front of them to invite people to reflect on their own privilege, their own ways in which they've moved through the world, where they can be more helpful, how to rehumanize the folks we've othered, and to say, we're a bunch of well-meaning white folks. How do we use our power and our privilege in ways that aren't patriarchal, that we're giving what is being asked for and not what we think the other needs? Because we are very good at charity, and that can be toxic. If, it's like you're sending parkas to Florida after a hurricane. Like, Florida doesn't need that. Ask them what they need. And so getting better at, again, the legacy of colonialism, where you go in and you fix things because you know how to do it.
You tell them what they need.
Exactly.
As opposed to actually meeting them as humans and risking getting dirty. Yeah.
And knowing that you're not the expert in the room.
Hey folks, it's Clare interrupting for just a second here. At this point in the conversation, we experienced a power difficulty. I had just asked Reverend Paige about whether or not she had seen these attempts to serve all of the congregation, especially those who have been othered historically, is sometimes misinterpreted as simply being, and I'm using air quotes here, woke.
Yeah, so what does woke even mean? And so if folks want to call us that, fine. That there are plenty of churches that are very clear about who's not welcome. And if you don't like the welcome, you are welcome to go somewhere with more walls. There are very few churches where I feel comfortable, where I feel safe. And so I'm always going to be on the side of the few, and on this making the outsider feel more comfortable as opposed to the insider being offended. Because there are places for them to go. There may not be places for the queer kid to go.
Yeah, but there's a balance there.
Oh, absolutely.
The demographic that we were talking about in Guilford, they deserve to feel comfortable in
absolutely.
That space as well. They deserve to feel loved and accepted, because as you were describing, the message is all of us, not some of us.
Right. And so you start with, the straight, white, able-bodied folks, But you don't stop there, including the people with disabilities and racial minorities and queer folks and gender messy folks and faith hurt folks, doesn't make it any less safe for the first group of people that I mentioned. That is sort of the baseline. As a white person, I feel comfortable pretty much everywhere. There are places in which my wife notices that I get funny looks and she just wants to, give people death stares all the time. But walking into spaces that also have decentered whiteness doesn't mean it's any less for me. It just means it's also for folks who are non-white to feel more comfortable. So that's the balance, right? To say just because we are sensitive to the language and the symbolism that we use to make our welcome broader doesn't mean that it's not also for you. And that can be tricky.
Tell me a little bit about that gender journey. You've said you're non-binary. Pronouns are
they, them.
They, them. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Short answer, I don't know.
Okay.
Longer answer, grew up as a tomboy in Southwest Michigan. There's a photograph of me. It was my preschool school picture where I'm in a skirt and sweater, both knit, and they're pink and they've got white hearts on them. And I'm wearing white tights and white Mary Janes and like a little pink bow in my hair with a teddy bear on it.
You're adorable.
Blonde. I was such a blonde baby. And my mom, I recently was talking about this picture and my mom said, "Oh, I had to fight you to get in that outfit." And I was like, yeah, little me,
Back then, yeah.
So my parents named me Anne Colleen Reilly. And I was Annie, and then when I was 2 in the second grade, it was Annie is a little girl name. I'm Anne. And so I was Anne forever. And the only boy I ever loved, his name was Nathan, and he was my best friend. But the cultural script that we were handed was boys and girls couldn't be friends unless they were like boyfriend, girlfriend.
How old was this when you knew Nathan?
Elementary school.
Okay.
We were in classes together for several years in a row. We could ride bikes to each other's houses. And so like the sixth grade, Nathan was my first kiss on the school playground during lunch.
Wow.
Yeah.
Daring.
Yeah, we were like 12. It's, and
nobody was kissing me when I was 12.
Yeah.
I'll tell you that much.
That's because 12-year-olds are terrible. They don't know. No one knows what they're doing when they're 12, nor should they. And I remember in middle school when gender started to be real, right? Because there's a genderlessness to children that is really beautiful and unselfconscious. And in middle school, gender becomes the most important thing, right? And this is when I first experienced not knowing how to be a girl. This is when there were school dances and there was makeup and fashion and
body changes,
body stuff, and I affectionately refer to myself as teapot shaped. I'm short and stout, and I've always been a big kid. Always been a big kid. And so there's being the fat kid too, and being awkward and wanting somehow to be let into the secret world of boys, and the way girls communicate and ice each other out. And I mean, it was anyone who says middle school was fun. I don't think I have anything in common with them, right? So that was when I first really felt like I'm doing this wrong. But I went to Christian school in the Midwest, and I had no possibility models of what gay was or what trans was. And this was, the mid-90s, and we didn't talk about it. I mean, I remember an episode of Life Goes On. Do you remember that show?
I never watched it, but yeah, I remember.
It was like Sunday night, and there was an episode with a kid who had HIV, and it was like a very special episode of Life Goes On, right? And I remember watching that with my parents, or at least with my mom.
Right around the time of Fry and White, right?
Yep. And it was just so far removed from anything in my world. Very sheltered, very white, very Christian community that I grew up in. And so, getting to high school, being awkward, having a handful of friends, having crushes on girls, but not really knowing that they were crushes, trying to have crushes on boys, but feeling like I didn't really know what I was doing. Again, I wanted to be friends. I wanted to be led into that secret world, but I didn't. Again, I just didn't have the words or the script to be able to go there. So when I was in college, I started getting treated for depression and anxiety, which helped a lot. There were times through high school and middle school where I was definitely suicidal, but in like a really evangelical kind of way, like praying for the end of time, like Armageddon to come, so I wouldn't have to come out, Right. And if Armageddon wouldn't come, then maybe I should just leave.
I do know that feeling.
Yeah, you know that feeling. And so in college, I got really lucky that there were folks in my life who paid attention and who suggested that I get some mental health counseling and some meds, which really helped. It went from the best metaphor I've been able to come up with for someone who's gone from like a chronic major depressive, 7 years into a more balanced brain chemistry is it felt like I was given 3 crayons, and those crayons were like gray and brown and another shade of gray. And then someone handed me a 64 pack of emotions in crayons, and like, what are these colors, let alone how do I use them appropriately?
Right.
Like where does the yellow go?
That's such a great metaphor. Gray is the color of my childhood.
Mm-hmm. And do you find that you like in of your memories of your childhood?
Yeah.
There are so few genuinely happy moments. Everything is, I just can't remember big swaths of adolescence because there's just nothing good to remember. And I think my brain is protecting me in some of that, right? So in college, I came to terms with the fact that I was gay, realized that was why I was bad at flirting, or that it, because when you've been handed this, like, God wants you to be a wife and a mother expectation, when all of your friends in college are pairing up and you're the one on the outside, it's like, well, what's wrong with me? Mm-hmm. And I'm just awkward and ugly, and no, I'm not a girl. I'm not into boys. And so when I started recognizing that I was gay, things kind of clicked into place for me. I mean, it was still really scary. I didn't come out to my parents until I was 23. And I had to make sure I was mostly financially independent because I didn't know how they were going to react. The genderqueer bit didn't happen until graduate school, because at this point I had just, referred to myself as a chapstick lesbian as opposed to a lipstick lesbian, right? Yeah.
I've never heard that one before. That's great.
That's an appropriate response, yeah. Or soft butch or whatever. Yeah. And so I was in graduate school interning at Judson Memorial Church, which is in the West Village in Manhattan, with a friend of mine named Jamie, and they were doing their master's thesis on genderqueer liberation theology. And one day Jamie said to me, I think you're genderqueer. And I don't know if I literally shoved them or if I just thought about it, and my reaction was, I'm not your fucking project. A year later, I called them. And I was like, you get to say it one time. And Jamie responded, told you so.
There you go.
And so as I've started to figure out like what that means for me, I've stopped going by Anne, which is such a feminine name. I'm grateful for it. It's my mother's middle name. But like any gift your parents give you, sometimes you can be done with that gift.
Sometimes it doesn't fit.
Sometimes it doesn't fit. And I started going by Reilly, which was a little problematic because it's my last name. And so I kind of became Cher or Madonna, just Reilly. Mostly I like to say it was like MacGyver.
Oh, okay. I was leaning toward Prince.
Oh, that's so nice of you. Yeah.
Super cool.
Yeah. But then when Rachel and I got married, Paige is her middle name. So we have taken a matriarchal last name from her family. It's her grandmother's maiden name. So on official correspondence, my name is the Reverend A. Reilly Paige. Mm-hmm. So Reilly is my middle name.
Okay.
And plenty of people go by their middle name, so it's a little less strange. But I love being Reilly. I love the neutrality of it. I love how it's always spelled wrong, but it's never said wrong. Right. You might get it wrong, but you're still right. Within the last year, I started using they, them as my pronouns because they're the least incorrect. When I look in the mirror, she, her doesn't quite fit, and he, him doesn't quite fit. And so they, them is what English gives me. Other pronouns don't hurt me. I've definitely been in places where it's pronoun roulette. Whatever comes out of somebody's mouth is going to come out. And there are definitely folks who, if they spend a very little amount of time with me, or they just attend a service that I'm leading, might gender me masculine as a cis dude. And that doesn't bother me. In fact, I kind of find it delightful. When I go out to restaurants and my wife and I are referred to as ladies over and over again, she is confused because to look at me, she's like, how does anyone gender you feminine? So, it's just, again, English is limiting. And when people say, oh, I was taught blah, 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 it's like, you use the third person singular constantly. You just don't know it. Like, I ordered pizza, they'll be here in 30 minutes. That doesn't sound weird to you. You've said that. You've said that every time you've ordered pizza. We watch at my household a lot of cooking competition shows, and one of them is Tournament of Champions, where the judging is done blind, and the judges always say, "This chef, they," and it's just seamless because they don't know the gender of the chefs they're talking about, and so it's always chef and they.
Yeah.
And it's not hard. Same thing with pastor and reverend.
Oh, yeah.
And there's the outfits that we wear on Sunday are called vestments. And so it's usually a robe and then a piece of fabric that goes around my neck called a stole. Mm-hmm. And there's something about getting into uniform and zipping up that black robe that it's not about my body anymore. Female leaders of churches can often feel on display with their bodies. I know many of my female colleagues, particularly those who have been pregnant in public, have had comments like, I'm struggling with my pastor being pregnant because now I know that you've had sex. Or, mentioning weight or hair or touching or getting projected mother, sister, lover onto their bodies. And there's something about being masculine of center that I don't get that noise. And I can move in spaces where my more feminine colleagues might feel unsafe. And there's something about the vestments, like reverse Superman, right? That now I am stepping into the role of pastor. Now I am a leader of this spiritual community in a way that I am trained for, that I specialize in, that these people have given their trust over to me in this arena for this good hour. And to de-emphasize the body in that has been deeply comforting for me. Sometimes I need to be fully embodied, that I need to feel my binder and feel my tie cinched around my neck, and I need the dig of a cufflink to feel fully embodied. Mm-hmm. And that's fine. It depends on the day.
Yeah, and the role.
Right.
When you're up there in front of the congregation, yes, you are a person. You are you, but you're fulfilling a function there. You're fulfilling a role, and that kind of supersedes you, the individual, right? That you're there to take that to take them to that space that you and I were talking about earlier, where you're not really in control 100%, that you've let go enough for this other power to come in.
Yeah.
We started out by talking about body images and how we learn about who we are. And the problem is that you're considerably younger than I am, but they just didn't exist, those images.
Yep.
And you and I were talking last time we had coffee about sort of nerd culture. Yeah. And because of the lack of substantive models, there were no trans people on television. There wasn't part of the conversation. There were, non-binary was not a thing.
Not a thing.
And so queer people went looking.
Yeah.
And we looked very often to genre fiction. And I wanted to sort of wrap up by taking us into that.
Yeah.
Because, I think in maybe the same ways, maybe different ways, we've looked at things for comfort, for inspiration, for mentorship. So the important question is Spike or Angel?
Oh God. No.
Okay, maybe that's not the question.
No.
Okay.
Both of those relationships are problematic in their own way, but Spike is prettier.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah. So if we're going purely on the human and not on the creature and not the relationship with Buffy, Spike is much prettier and more interesting.
Yes.
I think Angel is.
He's a brick.
Thank you. I was going to say
just a piece of cinder block.
David Boreanaz in his Buffy the Vampire days could not act his way out of a paper bag. He gets so much better, but this is what happens when you take a dog walker off the street and cast him.
Angel got progressively better each of the 5 seasons.
Yeah.
By the end, it was an excellent show. All right, we're dropping Buffy, or you can continue in the Buffy vein, but who and what images spoke to you?
So trying to think back as to like what I was really into as a kid, and it was like superhero stories. And I was prime territory for Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. And again, like I grew up in the mid-90s, right? I was born in 84. And the idea of secret identity, right? And people coming together to become something more than themselves individually to defeat evil and save their community, but nobody knew about it. Yeah. Those sorts of stories really spoke to me. Again, like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, watching that in real time, Willow being so precious to me in lots of ways, and wanting that storyline to have gotten pushed further. The trauma of the kill your gays trope.
The Whedon problem. Well, one of the Whedon problems.
No, Joss, just do better. And in the eternal words of Madame Roxanne Gay, put men on rice. But finding huge comfort in that secret identity piece. I also was really into MacGyver. Like MacGyver, I have a Funko Pop of MacGyver as sort of my fictional
spirit animal,
spirit guide of some kind, or archetype. And making something out of nothing, being resourceful, using what you have, being ordinary but extraordinary, being smart, being brave, being loyal, leaving no one behind. Those were things that I wanted to be, and feeling kind of scrappy about my gender and about my sexuality, and not having the resources given to me, but picking them up around me. That really helped. But yeah, superheroes, MacGyver, Buffy.
I love the communal aspect of the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. And that is, well, that is something that would never have appealed to me because I understood bone deep that I was alone.
Yeah.
I'm on my own. And so that, to have to say this about the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, but that was complete fantasy.
Sure.
The fact that there would be other like-minded people and we could come together and be more than the component parts. There are no other people, as far as I'm concerned. You know, and so the trope of the lone hero, which obviously goes back through westerns and all the serials and certainly through superhero comics.
Yeah, the Batman, the Spider-Man, the Buffy Summers,
Wolverine, right? Part of a group, but never quite giving up that feral loner thing.
Yeah, a little bit dangerous.
Yeah,
always a little on the outside, always misunderstood. No, that makes total sense to me, and that is a really hard way to live. Yeah. My hope for you is that you've found your Scoobies or you found your X-Men in some shape or form.
The Scoobies might have been the first time that I thought about that. That it's like, okay, yes, you have this set of skills and you're in this circumstance, but you're really not going to make it on your own. Watching this character, it's like, yeah, somebody needs to be the Willow to your Buffy. Somebody needs to be the goofy heart. If you really are that clenched.
Well, and that's what makes Buffy so successful. Is she's the first Slayer to have a community,
right?
And to see that show play with the tension between the lone hero and one girl in a generation, and then like her band of misfits. I would argue the best way to watch that show, seasons 3 through 7, and then 1 and 2. That's how you watch Buffy.
Really? Well, certainly 1 is the weakest.
Yeah.
Well, the thing with Buffy is that she knows how the story is going to end.
Yeah.
Don't know when, don't know which specific vampire, but all the Slayers end the same way. And so her arc over the course of the 7 seasons is, all right, you know what you're fighting for, and you know what you're going to die for. What's worth living for? Yeah.
Yeah. And for folks like us, that is the eternal question, right? Because we've seen so often how the story ends, and the stories are changing. But, thinking about the day we met when the young person said, I'm so excited to see trans futures, that was essentially their point. And, we get to age. We get to have full lives. We get to find happiness, to curate joy in what's worth living for, and what's worth trying to find our Scoobies to bring along for the ride.
Back to gratitude.
Yeah, right.
So
there it
much
is.
To be grateful for. And you are one of those things.
Oh, Claire, it's been my honor.
You are beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
And thank you so much for being here today.
Really, really glad to be here, and thank you for sharing this project with me. And again, blessings on the journey, my friend.
This episode will be arriving on Friday, November 17th, which is also our inaugural game night at the Blue Orchid in New Haven. So if you're listening on Friday morning, it's not too late to join us. Photographer and friend of the show, Sam Avery, and I have put together a series of game nights. This one coincides with the opening at the Orchid of Sam's latest art exhibit, Transcendence. You can get all the details at transqat.com or from either Sam or me on social media. If you enjoyed this conversation with Reverend Paige, and I sure hope you did, consider checking out episode 33 with Reverend Aaron Miller of Metropolitan Community Church, and episode 3 with Rabbi Marcy Bellows of Congregation Beth Shalom Rodfei Zedek, an episode subtitled Two Nerds in a Synagogue. Lastly, if you have a Kindle and a spare 99 cents, and let's face it, you can't even get a coffee at Cumbies for 99 cents anymore, consider buying a copy of Always Love Me, a short story available through the publishing link on the Transqat homepage. It's got romance, friendship, and just the right amount of sexy time. It also answers the question, what the hell is narcissist radio anyway? This is Transqat. I'm Clare McCarthy. Thanks for listening.
This is Sadie McCarthy. I'm Claire's niece.
And you've just been listening to Transqat. It is made by one of my favorite people in the world, Clare McCarthy.
Transqat is a production of Transqat Enterprises, LLC.
Copyright 2023, all rights reserved.
Join us on the web at transqat.com.
That's TRANSQAT.com.
QAT.com.
QAT.com.
There you'll find links to Transqat, the blog,
writing projects,
speaking engagements,
and our PayPal donations page.
Please consider supporting our mission with your monkeys.
Monies.
Your monies.
Your monies.
Not monkeys.
Please consider supporting our mission with your monies. Any monkeys will be gratefully received as well.
Follow Transqat on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube.
On TikTok, we are at The Real Transqat.
Want to tell your story on air?
Or ask Claire a question.
What is the deal?
She has all the answers.
Or suggest a guest or topic for an upcoming episode.
Use the contact page at the website
or email her directly at crmtransqat@gmail.com.
crmtransqat@gmail.com.
And thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening. Bye.